Welcome to a brand new episode of the Post Game. I'm your host, Dave. I'm joined by Oronde.
What's poppin'?
And today we are back talking about the college football playoff rankings that came out today. I am so excited because I posted a video about this earlier today, a little short, and so many people have been upset about it. But I'm about to break it down to you. So right now I'm gonna give the 1 through 9 or 1 through 7 rankings right now. So Michigan finished off at first place, Washington second, Texas at 3, Alabama at 4, Florida State 13-0, Florida State at 5, Georgia number 6, Ohio State number 7. Oregon finished 8th, Missouri 9, Penn State 10. Everybody else is irrelevant. All right. So, looking at these rankings, Oronde, do you think the top 7 or top 4 in particular, let's start with top 4, are fair?
No.
So so we're gonna do that. I'm gonna let you give your top 4, then I'm gonna give my top 4, and then we can go from there.
I think the top 3 are in the correct order, and 4 should have been Florida State.
Listen. I'm gonna do you one better. I was okay if you put Florida State, Georgia, or Ohio State in that 4th spot. Any of those three, I'm okay with.
Regardless, Ohio State should have been above Bama.
I 100% agree.
Georgia
agree.
Georgia is still probably better. Georgia is still probably better than Ohio State, even though it pains me to say that. But Bama didn't deserve to be higher than 6 or 7.
Not at all. Easily. And so let me explain something to you. So, and this is what I got so mad about. People on my TikTok and my YouTube, everybody's upset because I said Bama should not have been 4th place. They should not have. So let's look at it. Florida State finished 13-0 this season.
Yep.
Impressive season. They played 2 SEC teams. They beat LSU, who played. Let's look at it. A really, really good season, being 10-2. They played a great season. You look at Georgia. They lost their first game in 29 games to a, don't get me wrong, good Alabama team. Let's also look at Ohio State. They lost to, at the time, the number 2 team in the country, and they fell to they fell.
We fell 4 spots.
4 spots. In my opinion,
that's absolutely absurd.
That you sit here and you give Alabama the 4th position after they beat a number 1 Georgia. Don't get me wrong, they beat a number 1 Georgia, but who are Alabama playing in November? Chattanooga. This is an absolute joke, and the committee should be ashamed of themselves because they got it wrong. But yet their excuse for taking out Florida at 13-0 was because their quarterback play is poor. I don't want to hear it when it comes to quarterback play is poor whenever at the start of the season Alabama couldn't tie their shoes and walk, or couldn't tie their shoes and play football because they were so bad. They didn't play anybody relevant. They didn't play teams that are effective or that are top teams. But yeah, when Michigan, so every year we're not supposed to have Michigan and Ohio State can't get into the playoffs because they play each other and one of them have to lose. So does that mean both of them aren't going to make it every year? That's a joke. It's an absolute joke, and the committee should be ashamed of themselves. Should be an absolute shame of themselves. Alabama lost to Texas. Don't get me wrong, Texas is a good football team. They deserve to be in that spot, but they lost to Texas. It's just ridiculous about what the committee's done these days, and I'm sick of it. I'm sick of hearing all these Alabama fans say, "Oh, you just hate Alabama," blah 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 blah. I don't care. Your team should not have been there this season, and that's all I have to say. So that's my take on it.
All right,
what's your
my
take,
turn,
Mr. Ohio State fan?
My take is pretty similar because speaking of Bama. Allegedly, so what I've been hearing on the internet is that part of the argument for not including Florida was that they barely what was it? They had to go against LSU or something like that.
Yeah.
But that was also part of Bama's argument for getting in the first place. So that doesn't make any sense. How can you discredit Florida State for their game against LSU, but give credit to Bama for beating LSU?
Exactly.
So I actually saw another one describing Bama's resume, struggling against 6-6 Group 5 teams, barely beating Auburn, barely beating Arkansas.
Mm-hmm.
Hell, how are they? Why did they even go down so far to Georgia in the first place? Why were they down
Yeah.
20-10 entering the fourth quarter? Granted, Georgia choked, but regardless, that's still a Bama is supposed to be the premier team and all of this other jazz, and they want to just put them in because it's Bama. We cannot talk about the SEC anymore. We can't just give SEC what they want anymore because they had a down year across the board.
100%.
Still a good conference, but they had a down year across
The
the
Big
board.
Ten
And
was the
you
best.
can't
Was
even
the
do
Big
that.
Ten or the Pac-12 were the best? Was the best conference this season, and it wasn't even close. The SEC did not play competitive football this season. But for the idea that someone said on my TikTok was like, yeah, the SEC, whoever wins the SEC championship is automatically in the playoffs. That's a joke. That should not be how it is. It's an absolute joke. That's
6 years
pathetic from
ago,
the committee.
Shannon Sharp gave arguably one of his greatest quotes about
I saw.
college football in Bama. Welcome to the Alabama Invitational.
Yep.
This is getting out of hand. We cannot allow this to continue because this is just damaging to the game. And who is it? Florida State's commissioner said it. It was like, what are we going to tell our kids, our players, to like avoid getting hurt just so we can get into bowl games and stuff?
Or think about it.
Arguments.
Or think about it. It's hard for you to recruit players to Florida State, for instance, or Oregon, or Missouri, or Penn State. Whenever everything's going to go through the SEC. Okay, the SEC sell tickets, they sell numbers, but it's pathetic for you to say that any team who wins the SEC championship game gets into the playoffs. There's an argument for Georgia to be in there. Georgia. But Alabama sneaks in at 4. It's a crime. It's a crime. It's an absolute crime, and Florida State should be sitting at that 4 position. I don't care who their quarterback is. They've had the better season. They didn't lose a game. They were 13-0. What a joke from the committee.
So
what an absolute joke.
Speaking of ineligible schedules, Florida University's schedule for next season is absolutely insane.
I saw it.
So say Florida wins out next season, that automatically puts them in. Is that what you're telling me? No. So it's not even that puts them in. Say Florida wins everything next season, like FSU did. You're gonna kick them out if Bama and Georgia are still up there. That's what you're telling them. So you're saying that we have to play this incredibly tough schedule, and we will never be rewarded for it solely because there's another school.
Do you have the schedule pulled up?
Which one?
The Florida one.
Yeah, I have it pulled up.
Read it out for me if you can.
It's not in order, but they play Miami, UCF, Florida State, Samford, Kentucky, LSU, Ole Miss, Texas A&M, Georgia at a neutral site, Tennessee, Texas, and Mississippi State.
Like, if they win, even, in my opinion, even if they lose one of those games, there should be a conversation. I mean, 1 or 2. There should be a conversation where, because look, right now, because next year will be the 12-man roster, the 12-man bracket, right? Mm-hmm. So right now, Oklahoma is sitting at 12th, which is interesting in itself. Just wild, in my opinion. But that's a 2-team loss. They should be able to sneak in with a 2-team loss. Because it's ridiculous that Alabama's just stuck in at 4.
There's one other school that also had a really tough schedule, but I cannot remember what it is for the life of me. But I looked at it and I was like, whatever the poster was, they said it was like the gauntlet, and I was like, that's accurate, because how do you even come up with something this difficult just to give to one school?
Yeah. And if you look at it, and so the thing is, I heard the commissioner of college football came out and was like, yeah, whenever you like your quarterback play, or your starting quarterback being out is a main reason why Florida State didn't get in. I think that's criminal.
Is more than just the quarterback.
I think that's the most criminal thing I've heard in my life. It's an absolute joke from the committee. Sorry.
Absolutely criminal.
You Alabama fans can cry and say you don't know what you're talking about. I don't really care what you feel. I don't. You guys should not have made it this season, in my opinion. That's all I'm saying. That's
Plain and
all I'm
simple.
gonna say.
There have been harder schedules that have been snubbed by
Let's look
far.
at. Matter of fact, I'm gonna pull up. Let's look at Alabama's schedule this season. So Alabama this season has played. Where are we at? They have played. Okay, so they started the season off against Utah State. Then they beat Texas. Wait, no, this is the wrong year. Sorry. Here we are. All right, so they started the season off against Middle Tennessee. Blew them out. Texas beat them by 10 points, week 2. Then they played South Florida. Then they played Ole Miss, and they beat them relatively decently. Then they played
Ole Miss
a
is a
bad,
good school.
yeah, and they beat a bad Mississippi State team. They beat a bad Texas A&M team. They beat a bad Arkansas team by 3 points. Like they beat Texas A&M by 6, Arkansas by 3. They beat Tennessee by 14. LSU they held their own. Then they played Kentucky, Chattanooga in November. They almost lost to Auburn. Are we not going to talk about that? Like, how are we talking about their game against Auburn? They went to overtime, almost, and almost lost to Auburn by 3 points. That's a joke. That's a joke. It's a joke. We're not going to talk about the Auburn game? Like, that actually happened. But we're going to sit here and talk about Florida State's game against against Louisville last night and their offensive play, and they almost lost to an unranked Auburn team. Yeah, okay, goodbye.
Florida State their defense held teams to negative like 40 yards in the fourth quarter, among other impressive feats for the fourth quarter alone. And you're going to tell me that their QB play is the question? Like, they obviously can win games without their quarterback. And don't remember the saying, don't even get me started on the saying, defense wins championships, because it absolutely does. And they have an amazing defense. And you want to discredit them just because maybe their offense won't produce. Then why the hell did they put Iowa in the top 25? Iowa has no offense. It's all defense.
Nope.
Yeah, they can be ranked pretty highly.
So here's the schedule for next year for Alabama. They play FSU. They play Wisconsin. They play Georgia early. They play Tennessee. Then they have LSU. They play Mercer, which is interesting for even why they're playing Mercer. They play Oklahoma, Auburn, Missouri, South Carolina, and Vanderbilt.
Wow.
So
that South Carolina game's not even going to be difficult because there's no more Spencer Rattler. I think he's declaring for the draft.
South Carolina's not a good football team. They're not a good football team. Sorry. They're just not. And you're playing Vanderbilt at the end of the season. Interesting. Anyway, I think I'm done on my soapbox. I'm gonna back off, and I'm just gonna let it ride at this point. I can't change anything, and it just is what it is. So, any final thoughts you have on this this disgrace from the college football committee?
The committee's old and out of touch.
Yeah, sounds like the NFL, isn't it?
The NFL. It's funny you mention that. The NFL has such an easy to understand playoff system.
Yeah.
But we go to college football, and it's the shadow council decides. As it's
Granted, don't get me wrong. 8 and 9 teams should be making the playoffs at the 4th position, but but you know, it's the system's in place. It's been in place for decades. This clown show is directed by a bunch of old men who loves the SEC. Bunch of clowns. Goodbye. Anyway, I've been your host, Davion. This has been Oronde. This has been the post game. Peace.